Hi, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to our build of the Pilot RC Predator 2.2 meter jet. In this episode, we're going to cover some of the preliminary stuff that we started right after we did the unboxing. We're going to talk about how we joined the rear part and the forward part of the fuselage, installed the turbine thrust tube, and then began the routing of our servo extension cables for the tail, the rudder and the two elevator halves, and some of the special things we had to do because it was a jet, like heat shielding. So we'll cover all of that. On the surface, that might not seem too exciting, but you'll see as we go through the video some of the challenges we ran into. Hope you enjoy it. If you like what you see, please click the like button, please click the subscribe button, and be on the lookout for our future episodes as we continue this build. So let's get started. This is a view of the inside of the fuselage, looking up the tailpipe. You know, the thrust tube is not installed yet, so we're looking through the back of the airplane. And the picture has the fuselage upside down. So what's on the bottom is the top of the fuselage. What's on the top of the picture is the bottom of the fuselage. The curved bracket, you see, that would represent where the thrust tube comes through the fuselage and exits the ring that's right in the foreground of the picture. The three servo extension leads are one for each elevator half coming from the left and the right, and one coming from the rudder going into the conduit tube that goes toward the forward part of this section of the fuselage. The snakeskin sheathing that you see is not your typical servo wire snakeskin. It's made for very high temperature applications. In fact, this particular product is often used for the liner of oven doors. So the idea here is to protect that servo wire that's going to be sitting directly above the thrust tube to protect it from the heat that's going to get generated by the engine and the thrust tube. The metal tape that's holding everything in place is a standard metal tape you buy at Home Depot. It's got very sticky substance on the sticky side, so it holds really well to that fiberglass. So I'm certain this stuff is not going anywhere. And that's part of the lessons learned I talked about in my introduction that I need to learn about jets. And one of those things that I'm learning is everything needs to be shielded from the heat, especially from the engine back. Forward part of the fuselage is more conventional, but here we really do need to take care. Here's a look at those same servo extension leads from the outside the fuselage. Left elevator here. And we'll pan around to the other side. We see right elevator and rudder. And then we'll look up the tailpipe and we'll see that same view that we looked at just a second ago with the wires coming in, into the heat shield, and then through the tube that takes you to the front of the fuselage. Now, from the front section of this portion of the fuselage, here's our wire loom coming out. And we can have a look at how long these wires really are. And all of these are going to have to get routed eventually to the front of the fuselage. So in this next segment we'll look at how we join the rear and the front half of the fuselage. Here we have the rear and the front temporarily joined. We have the thrust tube in place but not mounted, and the bolts that hold the rear to the front, I only have one bolt in, just holding it together. What we're looking at here is the thrust tube and how much it has to come out, right? This is the minimum, right? It's got to come out enough to clear all of the fiberglass. If it was any shorter than that, the hot exhaust gases would melt the fiberglass. So with that known, now what we need to do is mark our mounting holes, which that's about all I can do in the way I'm thinking about this right now. I can get a pen in there and mark it, but I don't have any clue right now about how I'm going to drill the hole or even run a screw into that, because it's largely inaccessible based on the angles and how deep it is under fuselage material. So I'm going to have to use some imagination to figure that out. And I think when we get to the next segment, maybe we'll look at how to do that. So I was able to mark the spot with a Sharpie easy enough. But in terms of getting a screwdriver or a drill there, there's just so much fiberglass over that spot. I had no earthly idea how I was going to do that because I don't have a short 90-degree turn drill or screwdriver. So I ended up drilling these holes in the flange where the hatch goes, and that gives me enough leverage where I can get the screw started, and then I can drill it down. I can screw it down. So don't let anybody tell you that putting one of these composite airplanes together is just a matter of reading the manual and just slapping it together. It really does require, for some of the operations, a lot of imagination. I just got done talking about how to get those thrust tube mounting holes tapped and drilled, and that was a bit of a challenge. But now we do have everything installed. We have the thrust tube in its proper place. We have both halves of the fuselage joined with all 6 bolts, and everything's firm and tight. So I just hope I never have to take this apart, because I think taking it apart would be almost as challenging as it was to put it together. Okay, so now here's the fuselage. I step back, see the whole thing put together. So major accomplishment for our first in our multi-video build series. So front and back are connected. Thrust tube is where it belongs. Now also take a look at that wire loom I was showing you earlier. We have that secured in place. It's running along the sidewall. It goes down. It goes into a conduit that runs underneath the fuel tank and comes out the front of the fuselage under the equipment tray, where when we finally get around to putting our radio equipment in, we do have plenty of slack in those wires, so I think I'm in good shape. The only other wires that are going to come forward from the rear of the airplane, or where the turbine is, are the wires that come in from the wings. And each wing will have 4 wires. It's going to have aileron, flap, landing gear, and brake. I don't think I'm going to run that stuff along the floor and into the conduit. I think what I'll do instead is I'll still heat protect it, but I'll run it up the sidewall from the back to the front of the fuselage. I'll decide once I get those wires in place what we're going to end up doing. But I think that'll be the most convenient way to run those wires and to keep it protected from the heat. So now that the fuselage is finally assembled, we could put the whole airplane together, at least dry fit the parts, so we can look at what that whole airframe will look like, wings and tail feathers. I'm pretty pleased with how much progress we've made so far, considering all of this is new to me. RC aviation is not new to me, but composite jet of this size and complexity is new to me. So in our next segment, we'll probably start working on the servos, working from the back of the airplane to the front.